Hello, I'm Jim DuBois, former CIO of Microsoft, and I'm here again on the Global CIO interview series for the CIO Water Cooler. Today we have Adriana Karaboutis, and she is the Chief Information and Digital Officer at National Grid, and I think we're going to have a good interview. Hello, Adriana, how are you?
Very well, Jim. Good to catch up with you again. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. This will be fun, I hope. In my book, I set up the lessons that I learned in transformation, talking about how every industry is transforming. And I think that you've got a great story of what's happening in the energy industry. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in the industry and then what you're doing in National Grid.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to, Jim. So interestingly enough, I've been with the company 7 months. And when I got the call to come interview with National Grid, I had to think to myself, a utility. Now, utilities seem to have the sort of reputation of being a quieter industry, a slower industry, et cetera. However, I took the call because, I'm sorry?
And sexy, right?
Very much so, actually, Jim. And that's actually why I ended up here, because it is exciting. And I guess I'll use your word, and sexy, because there's a huge transformation. There's a transformation in the industry, and there's a transformation at National Grid. And when you think about energy and the different energy sources that are now out there, the alternative energy from wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal, and nuclear, as well as our more traditional sources, there's some excitement there. But there's also excitement around what we call the distributed energy revolution, which is happening because your traditional consumers of energy, who may have, for instance, solar panels on their homes, may become producers of energy, use what they need, sell back to the grid, which is not as revolutionary as you think. It's actually happening in places. So it's quite interesting, and this industry is going through the digital transformation as most other industries, Jim. And I'm sure you could write a book about that.
Yeah. It's got to be a change in the whole business model for companies like National Grid, where you're going to be buying back from consumers as well.
Potentially, or consumers could sell to other consumers. So we're thinking about this completely out of the box, completely 2 steps ahead, to say, given digital technologies, given digital business models around customer engagement enablement, around how we actually produce product or transmit and distribute product, around how the world likes to think about things. Millennials want to know where their energy is coming from now. We actually tweet about that. In the UK, we're a British multinational, as you know, Jim. In the UK, we actually tweet out where did the UK's energy come from in the prior day, because people are interested in that. They want to know. And so it's a new world. It's really a great new world.
I know you have a big business here in the States as well, and I can imagine that message will play globally. So that's great. You've got a great background. I mean, you've been in automotive and tech, even the CIO at Dell. How's the transition been coming from other industries into the energy space? What has that felt like?
It's actually felt really, really good. So I always tell people my thesis is technology, staying with technology. It's evolving, so obviously it makes it very, very exciting. But the really big opportunity and challenge that I like to take on is taking that technology backbone into new industries. And it allows me to do a few things. First, I personally get to grow and learn new industries, new geographies, et cetera. But it allows me to bring some of the best practices, some of the applications, thought processes from other industries, not just from other companies in the same industry, which is also helpful, but from other industries into the next industry. And what that does is it forces you to really think out of the box and ask the question of why not? Why can't we do that here? Or what could we do? It also really helps put the mindset of futuring in place. So when you look at the auto industry that went from Do you want it black and white, or do you want a front or rear wheel drive vehicle, to now it's, in some cases, it's a computer with an attached vehicle, is how I describe some of the electric vehicles. You start thinking about who would have thought of that 15, 20 years ago. And when you come to the next industry, you do that futuring exercise. So it's really exciting.
So the things like innovation and risk, how do you think about that differently in this industry? Or what are you doing to help the industry be maybe a little less risk adverse in the right places?
Yeah. Great question. So first off, there's a very pragmatic and very practical side to every industry. So anyone that tells you have to go out and figure out how to innovate and be digital and all the rest without having line of sight to what the inviolables of a particular industry are, they're not either in touch or really honest with each other. And so for us, critical, electricity, gas are critical national infrastructures, one of a handful that actually the government has defined as those are paramount and tantamount to the safety, security, and functioning of a country. And so what are the things that will absolutely keep us safe, cyber secure, and continuity of supply? And how do we ensure that as we go forward and we innovate in a digital environment? So when I think of digital, Jim, I think about, customer enablement and engagement. I think about the digital employee, frictionless, paperless, anywhere along that spectrum. And I think about how do we use digital technologies to understand our assets, how they're aging, how they're behaving, et cetera, and get more insights and drive different business models to what we have. And by the way, electricity, gas utilities have a very different business model to most companies, which some may not realize. But we think about that. But again, I think about it with, you absolutely have to understand the risk that you're willing to take, the basic inviolables of a company, and you don't experiment in those spaces until you're ready. And so you really have to take enterprise risk management to heart and really understand what you're doing. And you have to be a 360-degree information and digital officer. Very long-winded answer. Sorry about that, Jim.
No, that's great. It sounds like you're having fun with this, Andy. So it sounds like there's a great transformation that's happening with the change in business model, the different clean energy coming in. Do you think about things like, well, actually, talk a little bit about what you're doing with your labs to drive innovation.
Yeah, so I have 2 labs in my organization. They're actually called National Grid Labs. I call them Next Generation Labs. Same acronym, works well. But we have one in the UK and one in the US. So as I said before, we're a British multinational company. We do transmission of gas electricity for all of the UK. And then here in the States, it's Massachusetts, New York, and Rhode Island is sort of our purview. It's a B2B business there because in the UK, because we don't do the last mile to the businesses and homes. Here, it's a B2C business. It's a business to consumer. So we do have millions of customers in the US, where in the UK, it could be 230 plus source and destination. And so National Grid Labs is 2 very strong seated labs that are in each region that work on the art of the possible, the what if, what are the big problems and challenges that we're trying to solve. And we sort of leave them cocooned, if you will, in a space and in an innovative environment where they can come up with solutions to things or opportunities. So drones, various ways of taking a look at how we engage with customers, various technologies. How would we use blockchain? We're doing some really interesting innovations around blockchain. And, what if you have customers that have a summer home that want to be able to fulfill and only buy what they want to buy for that home for the weekend that they're up there, just like you buy with an application time on a parking meter. So the world is their oyster, as I say, and they've come up with some really, really great applications and innovations in both regions. And we're looking to continue that, continue to seed it, and continue to drive it as we now started developing our overarching and overall digital strategy.
Have you been able to pull some of the innovations out of the lab and land them with the rest of the team? You were talking about some things that you're doing with even robotics and that. Did that come out of the labs?
Absolutely. In both regions, we've had some examples that are coming out. They're in prototype phases, and we're doing some work around drones and how we use those. And actually, we've got some out there to inspect remotely sites and things like that. We're taking a look at, how do we, and I don't want to tip my hand to everything here because I know my labs team would not be happy, but we're taking a look at, how do we, again, the blockchain, and we're actually starting that proof of concept. We're taking a look at how do we use analytics and deep machine learning to understand, for instance, how we balance electricity. Gas is something you can store, electricity is not. So the more real time you can balance supply with demand, the more effective and efficient you will be as a company. And so that's some of the things that we're taking a look at. Our engineers, not necessarily in my organization, but within our engineering groups, are looking at control theory, decision rules, and things like that, and how do we balance that a bit better. And so it's a constant evolution of doing better and better, and it's ultimately for our customers and our shareholders and our regulators. We are a highly regulated industry, as you know, Jim, and so regulators actually approve what it is we work on. Most people think we bill the customer. Regulators tell us what we can bill the customer. So even as a business model in this industry, it's very different.
It is a different model, but the same transformation, the same places where you can apply artificial intelligence, machine learning, it sounds great.
Absolutely.
You think about things like cybersecurity or even operational excellence different in this role from some of your previous roles?
Jim, every company and every industry you go into, I always index around risk and risk appetite, and where you can be a little bit edgier, if you will, or a little bit edgier, quicker or slower. So when I think about, when I was in the tech industry or even the biotech industry, when we were trying to do the market, we could experiment, we could put things out there a bit that was an 80-20 rule around technology. I mean, it was interesting last week, and I actually read a great quote from the head of LinkedIn that said, if you put something out by way of a software release and it's too good, then you haven't challenged yourself to, put more capability out there and sort of debug it a bit in the field with feedback from your users. When I think about utilities and critical national infrastructure and operational technology, my risk aversion is pretty high. I have to be very, very risk aware, and we would not be as edgy as maybe some of the other industries that I've been in that early out. But where customer engagement or enablement are concerned, we may try something a little bit easier. So that awareness, and its maniacal awareness of the business and risk, and I say that 10 times a day, it's about risk appetite, is what really drives the portfolio and what we try how quickly, I would say.
Yeah, I could imagine being critical infrastructure that you've got to think about it differently. I would also think, though, that the need for telemetry and the whole concept of fail fast, to be able to find something that isn't working and get it fixed quickly, that whole line of thought that is embedded in the whole agile thinking would really apply to your space.
It does. It does. We want to make sure that we are knowing deeply your assets, your data, your customers, your opportunities. If something requires attention, all of that has a very, very deep focus. So as you can imagine, even things up at a macro level, when we have a snowstorm, the company is absolutely fantastic at rallying together. Who's calling the shots? Where are we at? How do we get our customers safe? Because it's not just you and I sitting in our kitchens and we've, the power's off and maybe your generator's kicked in. You have nursing homes, you have hospitals, you have, people that rely on us. And so that's why our mission is actually bringing energy to life. right? It's not turning on your lights, it's bringing energy to life, which, you know, you can really rally around, and it's very, very exciting. And when we see what we can do on technology for the operational excellence, as well as for the digital enablement, the better experience and all the rest, pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I'm getting a much more advanced sense of the energy industry from this conversation. Anything else that you would add? Are there things with the people that and the culture that you've had to think about or even help transform as part of your role here?
Yeah, so we're a very, very, in our DNA is very strong engineering. We're an engineering company. We build substations. We balance electricity. I mean, we really take a look at what we do, again, along the basics as well as the innovation. And one thing that's changed for me is I've actually, with the technology group here and the digital group, have been indexing a bit on bringing very deep technologists in. So obviously we're taking advantage of the cloud and trying to say, how do we leverage the cloud and go away from, you know, the traditional data centers, which every company is doing. However, we're also indexing on, I need people that really understand technology, some of the disruptive blockchain, AI, machine learning, deep thinking, and things like that, and the Internet of Things, and be able to come in with some of those capabilities and having used them elsewhere. I'm actually indexing quite a bit towards, I want computer scientists, software engineers, agile development, you know, individuals that had experience there, integration, and I'm sorry?
Data scientists?
Data scientists, absolutely. Absolutely. Matter of fact, we have, I think I want to say upwards of 25 core data scientists right now. We've put robotics into play in some of our business areas. So I'm indexing heavily on the technologists. Now, you'll always want great leadership skills. We always want great people skills, great communicators, and people that can really understand the spectrum of business to implementation of technology and all the rest. But again, I'll go back to we're a heavy engineering company.
Yeah, that's great. And there's probably part of an engineering culture that helps in the transformation so that you can drive to digital faster.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So Jim, I've talked about heavy engineering to great leadership, talked about operational excellence to digital. You know, the answer becomes yes. We need all of that. We really do.
Great. Anything else you'd like to say to all the listeners?
Let's see. Yeah, every time you turn on your lights, or run the gas, or even run the water. I'll talk about my compadres down at the water utility, and that just recognize how much work, energy, and planning and execution goes on behind it. It's a ton. You know, when you see a car on the road, you can sort of say, wow, stylish, and, you know, revs, and what an engine, and, you know, so quiet, and all the rest of it or whatnot. But people think about utilities in the traditional sense of utility. And there's just some pretty amazing things going on, and there's a lot of work going on in what we do in the background to ensure that it is operationally excellent.
And opportunities for all of us with things like solar to become part of the whole model.
Absolutely. And we think about the distributed energy resources, think about consumers can now be producers, think about people that care about the planet and the world, you know, being interested in where their energy is coming from. Think about, you know, the extent to which the energy and the opportunity comes from utilities. You know, we do things like assessing how energy efficient a household is. Remote controlling now, things like nests and how we can tie things together, thinking about electricity, which I said before you can't store, but how true is that in the future world? Look at the Tesla batteries, look at what we can do. There's technology out there that says, how do we find technology that does store? It's interesting, Jim, we have a ventures arm at National Grid, and we just opened a office in California. As a matter of fact, Lisa Lambert, who used to be the ventures leader at Intel, is now heading that up for us. And she is finding great opportunities, great companies, great technology to bring back for the Chief Information and Digital Officer to use, our engineering folks to use, et cetera. So we're not just talking about this, we're actually positioning people and groups to do this. And although I've got digital in my title, it's not mine only to execute. It's around the recognition that you can have a digital strategy, but there are, people and pockets in the entire company that are part of that execution. And so this is a company that really, we work in partnership with each other quite heavily across all these organizations. So it's really good.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I will admit I stole the sexy word from another talk that I saw you give on the CXO talk, but you really have with the talk about how this is transforming and what's happening in the industry, you really are bringing energy to life.
God, thank you. I'm glad that came across, because that's how it feels here. So watch this space. I'd absolutely love to talk to you some more as we unveil some of the things that we're doing and actually put them out into what we would call production and that. So it's pretty exciting. It is pretty exciting.
Fantastic. We'll see if we can have you back when you get some of those things landed even more. But it's been great talking to you, Andy.
It's been great talking to you again, Jim. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.